Hi there, I'm Mia, and at 29 years old, I find myself freshly divorced from my husband, Fred. Our love story began back in college, where we shared classes and quickly fell for each other's charms. Despite our strong bond, there was a persistent thorn in our side. Fred's mother, Holly. She seemed to harbor an inexplicable animosity toward me, constantly meddling in our relationship. Despite voicing my concerns to Fred, he struggled to confront his mother, torn between loyalty to her and his love for me. Eventually, I resigned myself to endure Holly's unwarranted criticisms, believing Fred was inadvertently feeding her ammunition. Our relationship weathered many storms, with frequent arguments over his mother's influence. However, Fred eventually saw reason and ceased divulging details about our lives to her. After 3 years of dating, we tied the knot, much to Holly's chagrin. Her attempts to sabotage our marriage proved futile, and we distanced ourselves from her toxic presence for a while. During this period, both Fred and I found success in our careers. Although I outearned him slightly, to maintain balance, we split our expenses unevenly, with me covering the lion's share. Yet, despite our marital happiness, I felt a void within me, a need to pursue something of my own. Drawing upon my knack for design, I delved into graphic design as a side venture. Keen to keep it under wraps, I embarked on courses and invested in equipment without Fred's knowledge. My best friend, Jess, was the sole confidant of my new endeavor, offering encouragement and practical advice. As my skills flourished, Jess introduced me to acquaintances who were eager to engage my services. Despite my novice status, they admired my work and entrusted me with projects, gradually expanding my client base. This newfound source of income alleviated financial pressures and allowed Fred and me to enjoy a more comfortable lifestyle. With each paycheck, I squirreled away savings, dreaming of treating Fred to something special, a token of gratitude for standing by me through thick and thin. I hadn't broached the topic with him yet, and every time I considered it, it seemed like he was avoiding any serious conversation. It became evident to me that something was amiss, but he remained tight-lipped about it. The first inkling I had of trouble was when Fred confessed to me that he had exhausted his entire paycheck on investments just a week after receiving it. We had a heated disagreement about it, but we managed to patch things up for the time being. To make ends meet, I put in extra hours at work, which helped alleviate some of the strain. The following month, Fred repeated the same pattern, leaving me feeling exasperated. I couldn't fathom how he could squander his earnings so recklessly. In my frustration, I lashed out with hurtful words, though I later regretted my outburst. However, when the same scenario repeated itself for the third consecutive month, I reached my breaking point. I had become more cautious with my finances, working tirelessly not just at my day job, but also with my burgeoning graphic design side business, which was increasingly becoming our primary source of income. When Fred once again found himself strapped for cash, I was fed up. How could you let this happen again? Have you learned nothing? I admonished him. Despite his attempts to justify his actions, I refused to shoulder the burden of his financial irresponsibility any longer. It was a tough decision, but I made it clear that I would not be bailing him out this time. Fred's reaction was one of indignation and defensiveness, but I stood my ground. You can't gamble away your entire paycheck and expect me to cover for you, I asserted firmly. I won't enable this behavior any longer. Our argument escalated, with accusations hurled back and forth. In the end, Fred stormed off, leaving me to grapple with the turmoil of our crumbling relationship. In the aftermath of our confrontation, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to Fred's behavior than met the eye. Suspicions began to creep in, and I couldn't help but wonder if Holly, his overbearing mother, was somehow involved. Determined to get to the bottom of things, I decided to do a bit of sleuthing while Fred was out. It didn't take long for me to uncover the truth. Fred had been deceiving me. With access to his bank account, which he had unwittingly left logged in on my laptop, I discovered that he had more than enough funds squirreled away, contrary to his claims. As I scrutinized Fred's transactions, I couldn't find anything out of the ordinary apart from the usual debits. Perplexed, I wondered why he had been hiding his finances from me and weaving lies. Seeking clarity, I delved into his messages, and the first person I noticed him texting was his mother. Their conversation revolved around our recent altercation, with Fred painting me as the antagonist, claiming I had berated him for withholding money. Holly, his mother, seemed to revel in this discord, affirming her suspicions about me. As I scrolled further, I unearthed a disturbing revelation. Holly had been relentlessly disparaging me to Fred, labeling me as materialistic and insinuating that I was with him solely for financial gain. Ironically, I was the primary breadwinner in our household. Their exchanges showed how Holly's toxic influence had fueled Fred's grievances against me, magnifying minor annoyances and nurturing his resentment. The final blow came when I discovered their scheme to cut me off financially. Initially hesitant, Fred succumbed to Holly's manipulations, gradually acquiescing to her demands. He fed her ammunition by disclosing incidents where I expressed frustration, further stoking her animosity toward me. It was a devastating betrayal, leaving me reeling with hurt and confusion. Uncertain of my next steps, I sought solace in my best friend Jess. Nestled in her company, I shared the distressing truth I had uncovered, seeking her guidance in this tumultuous moment. Jess, ever the steadfast confidant, listened intently, offering her unwavering support as I grappled with the betrayal inflicted by those closest to me. I grappled with the weight of the situation, unsure of the best course of action. It seemed glaringly obvious. Cut off Fred's support, wait for him to hit rock bottom, then file for divorce. But Jess questioned the morality of such a plan, labeling it as cruel. Her concern nudged me to reconsider my approach, prompting her suggestion to sleep on it and revisit the issue the next day. Exhausted both physically and emotionally, I welcomed the respite sleep promised. The following morning, with the luxury of a weekend ahead, Jess and I sought solace in the familiarity of a favorite movie, drifting off to sleep in each other's company. The tranquility of the day brought a sense of peace, a temporary reprieve from the turmoil brewing within. We indulged in simple pleasures, immersing ourselves in movies, culinary delights, and each other's company. Despite the nagging thoughts of the previous day's revelations, I made a conscious effort to set them aside, prioritizing the much-needed respite. However, our reprieve was short-lived when Holly's call shattered the tranquility. Reluctantly, I answered, greeted by accusations and hostility. Holly's unwarranted accusations only served to exacerbate the tension, but Jess's encouragement urged me to maintain composure. In the midst of Holly's tirade, an unexpected proposal emerged, a 50-50 split of everything between Fred and me. It was a proposition tinged with skepticism, a test of my commitment to the marriage. Despite the audacity of her demand, I agreed, willing to entertain any possibility of salvaging what remained of our relationship. With tentative acceptance, plans were set in motion, culminating in a meeting scheduled for Tuesday to formalize the arrangement. Though uncertainty lingered, I resolved to confront the challenge head-on, armed with newfound determination to navigate the tumultuous waters ahead. I was stunned by the turn my marriage had taken, torn between disbelief and seething anger. How dare Holly brand me a gold digger, and how could Fred stand by and allow such an accusation? I had stood by him through thick and thin, supporting his endeavors even when they led to losses. I'd covered for him when he lied, shouldered the burden of our shared responsibilities, all while concealing my own side hustle, waiting for the right moment to reveal it to him. Sharing the details with Jess, her smile hinted at the brilliance of Holly's scheme. Splitting everything evenly would leave Fred with little to fall back on, given his lack of awareness about my additional income. I had hoped to surprise him with a lavish gift once my side venture gained traction, but now I was grateful to have it as a safety net. Tuesday arrived swiftly, and Jess accompanied me as support. Arriving home, we found Holly, Fred, and a lawyer already there, finalizing the contract. Ignoring Fred's silent plea for privacy, I approached Holly, demanding to review the terms. As expected, the agreement mandated equal division of assets, with a clause prohibiting financial assistance between us. Reluctantly, I signed, knowing it would leave Fred scrambling financially. Predictably, problems ensued. Initially, we exchanged only terse words, our rift too deep to bridge. Yet living under the same roof necessitated some communication. Fred attempted to breach the divide, but I remained aloof, resentful of his complacency. Eventually, tired of his persistent attempts, I relented. "Will you please just talk to me? We can't keep going on like this," Fred pleaded. His admission of missing our connection stung, juxtaposed against his willingness to sign away our financial unity. "What do you want me to say, Fred?" I retorted, my frustration palpable. "Is that why you agreed to sever our finances completely?" Fred's silence spoke volumes, laying bare the chasm between us. As we stood at the precipice of our shattered marriage, I grappled with the weight of our choices, uncertain if reconciliation was even possible. "I just needed to know where your loyalty lies, Mia. Despite all the issues caused by your mother, you still choose to side with her. Is this truly what you believe is best for us?" "Please, Fred, don't speak ill of my mother like that. And what wealth do you possess that you're so concerned about? I don't understand. I'm simply trying to make things right between us. Can we not lash out at each other? There will be no reconciliation until that contract is null and void. It's only been 2 weeks since we signed it, and I've seen no evidence to suggest you're not here for the money. If you're struggling financially, just let me know. I'm willing to help. Wouldn't that be a breach of the contract? I won't risk violating it. Why are you making this so difficult? Can't we just be civil?" I could see Fred grappling with conflicting influences, your mother's and his own. The Fred I married wouldn't have succumbed to such manipulation. That month, I diligently paid off our major debts, leaving Fred in a bind. With my share settled, I had more disposable income. Jess and I indulged in lavish outings, while Fred always had an excuse for his financial constraints. My graphic design side gig thrived, leading me to consider quitting my day job. Meanwhile, Fred struggled, his portion of the pantry often bare. While part of me empathized, I reminded myself he brought this upon himself. Holly's unexpected visit left me uneasy. Accusing me of stealing from Fred, she threatened to involve the police. Confused and defensive, I demanded an explanation. "You're accusing me of seeking revenge on Fred because I don't like the contract he made us sign. Please, your son has been struggling all month, but it's not because I've stolen his money to fund my outings to fancy places. He has no money to steal, and you know it. And let's not forget who actually coerced us into signing that contract in the first place. You forced it upon us, and now your son is paying the price." "Liar. I'm calling the police right now." "Go ahead. I haven't taken a single cent from your son." "Then how do you have so much money? Your job doesn't pay that much more than Fred's, and he's told me you've cut back your hours." "I have another business on the side, a graphic design venture that I plan to surprise Fred with. But thanks to your meddling, that plan went down the drain. I was even going to use the money to buy you a car." "How much do you make from it?" "More than you think, you see." I didn't lie. "I was trying to do something good, and then you ruined it. If you care so much about your son, maybe you should be the one supporting him." With that, I handed the divorce papers to Fred. I had filed for divorce right after we signed the contract, holding on to them until the right moment. Fred's shock was palpable, but I felt no sympathy. Holly's satisfaction should have been evident, considering it was what she had been pushing for. Instead, she looked furious now that she understood the consequences for Fred. I informed them I would be moving out in 3 weeks, agreeing only to continue splitting the remaining loan payments. Fred tried to plead with me, but I remained resolute, reminding him that this was the consequence of his actions. In the following months, I found liberation from the toxic relationship. Holly contested the divorce, but with our assets legally separated, there was little for Fred to gain. In fact, he ended up losing more, unable to keep up with the mortgage expenses on the house we sold. He moved back in with his mother. Meanwhile, my business flourished, and I gained lucrative opportunities with big brands. It was a blissful and rewarding period for me. I'm grateful I had something to fall back on, sparing me from the fate Fred endured. Perhaps this will serve as a lesson for him in the future. But that's not my concern anymore.